Hi there, I'm Nadira Jamal, the Belly Dance Geek. In this tutorial, I'll teach you how to create a looping audio track. Looping tracks are fantastic for practice. For example, if you're working on one section of a choreography, you can repeat that section of the music over and over again without having to pause and rewind. If you're working on improvisation, a looping track lets you engage with the same section of music over and over again, so you can try out lots of different ideas and get a sense of what works. In many ways, this is very different from practicing improv to an entire song because you get immediate feedback and trial and error on just one section. This is also fantastic for drum solos, so you can work with one section or one riff at a time. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you two different types of looping tracks. One is where you loop one section of the music continuously, so it repeats over and over again with no break. And I'll also show you how to loop one section of the music with a pause in between each repetition. For this tutorial, you'll need Audacity. You can get that for free at audacity.sourceforge.net. This runs on Mac, Windows, and Linux, and it's completely free and open source. That said, before you go to the trouble of learning how to creating looping tracks, be aware that there are apps for doing that. For example, there's the amazing Slow Downer app, which is available for iPhone and Android, as well as others. If it works for you, go ahead and use it. There's no reason that you have to bother creating your own looping tracks. However, I found that these apps don't let me set my in and out points as precisely as I'd like. So it can be tricky to find just the right starting and ending point for the loop without creating an awkward lurch in between. Also, when you use an app, you can't export your loop for other uses. For example, I frequently teach at places that only have CDs, and so it's helpful for me to be able to export my loop and burn it to a CD. In this tutorial, I'm going to be using some stock music by the artist Drawn, which I licensed through pond5.com. If you like this song, you can find it there. To begin, let's open up the file. I'm going to just grab my music file and drag it onto the Audacity window. And Audacity is warning me that I should make a copy of the file before I edit it. Depending on the format of your song, you may or may not get that option. I'm going to click on OK. And I'm actually not going to edit this original file. I'm just going to grab what I want and paste it into a new file. Now let's say that I want to repeat the first section of this song, which ends just over 30 seconds in. You can see from the waveform that it's very loud here, and then it suddenly gets quiet. And I happen to know that my section ends with a little bit of a quiet moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit using the zoom in tool, which is this plus sign magnifying glass. And I can see this little transitional moment. See, it's very loud here, and then it gets quiet. Now I happen to know that the section that I want ends with that quietness. But if you don't know, you can just place your cursor near that point and press the play button to listen so you can hear it as if you were playing it on a CD player or your phone. Once you know where the section that you want ends, you want to grab just a little bit more. So we want a little bit of extra music on the end. So I'm going to click and drag. Then I'm going to the Edit menu, and I'll choose Copy. Now I want to create a new file by going to File, New, and then I'm going to paste it in. And if I zoom out a little bit, you can see that we have just that section. That way we're never modifying our original file. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. So now we have the section that we want, but before we can loop it, we need to trim just a little bit. First, we have this empty space at the beginning. Now, in some circumstances, you might want that, but if we want our loop to continue with no pauses in between, then we need to get rid of that first. So I'm going to zoom in a lot, and I'm going to scroll to the left, and I'm going to select all, or as much as I can, of that empty space. and I'm going to press the delete key on my keyboard to delete that. So now the music starts immediately. We can add some more silence in when we're finished if we want. Now I'm going to zoom back out a little bit, and I'm going to scroll to the end. Now the question is, where in all of this scribbly stuff does my section actually end? So what we need to do is to listen to this section of the music and hear and identify exactly where that is. Now, I have a lot of experience doing this, so I happen to know that when my music has a sudden pause and then gets noisy again, that's probably where my section has ended. So I'm guessing it's right about here at 33 seconds. But I could be wrong. It could be anywhere in this section. So let's listen to this section so we can, and watch the cursor go. So I was right in guessing that the section starts right here with this round peak. So what I need to do is to delete all of that stuff from the next section. So again, I'm going to use my zoom in tool. I'm going to slide over, and we can see that this sharp little peak is where it starts. I'm going to zoom in even more. And I'm going to grab it close in, drag all the way to the end, and then I'm going to press the delete key on my keyboard to remove it. Now if I zoom out again, we can see that it looks like it ends pretty cleanly. But let's listen just to make sure. So in this case, it sounds like I've selected that pretty accurately. I don't have any extra beats or any extra fractions of beats, so I'm ready to copy and paste. Now, if you're less experienced with this process, or if your music is a little bit more complex, this may take some trial and error. So be patient, keep trying, and remember, never work in the original version of your file. If you mess up, you want to be able to scrap the whole thing and start over. So now that I'm confident that I have a chunk of music that has no extra at the beginning and no extra at the end, I'm going to copy this so I can loop it over and over again. So first I'm going to go into the Edit menu, and choose Select and All. I usually use Command A on my Mac. If you're on a PC, you can choose Control A. And then I'm going to choose Edit and Copy. And now if I paste immediately, it's just going to overwrite the whole thing. We can tell that because it's highlighted in gray. So I'm going to press the right arrow key on my keyboard, which will move the cursor all the way to the end here. So now I can go to Edit and Paste, and now I have another one that starts immediately. Now, this is a good time to check that our original selection was as clean as we thought. So I'm going to place the cursor earlier, and I'm going to drag over this transitional moment. So we're going to hear the last few seconds of the original, the transition point, and the first few seconds of the new one, just to make sure that that's a clean loop. And that sounds pretty good to me. So the last step is to add more and more loops. So we're going to repeat what we just did. I'm going to use the right arrow key on my keyboard. Actually, in this case, the selection doesn't let us do that, so I'm just going to scroll to the end, and I'm going to click right here on the end, and then I'm going to keep doing Edit and Paste, right arrow key, Edit and Paste, right arrow key. And remember that right arrow key's purpose is to move us to the end of the current timeline. Or I can press Command V or Control V, right arrow key, Control V, right arrow key, Command, right arrow key, Command, right arrow key. and so on until I get as many loops as I want. Now at this point, I've created a 5-minute loop, and I think that's pretty good. But if you're someone who likes to really do it over and over and over and over and over again, you could make 20 minutes if you want. Just remember that that'll be a bigger file. So let's listen to a full loop. As you can hear, that was a pretty clean splice. So let's go ahead and save it and export it. Then we can save our file by going to File, Save Project. Now this is saving the Audacity project file. It's not creating an MP3 or other simple audio file yet. So choose OK, and then choose where you want to save that. I'm just going to throw it on my desktop. Let's call it Loom. And then our next step is to actually export an audio file. So I'm going to go to the File menu and choose Export. And you can save that as an AIFF, as a WAV, etc. Now you'll see MP3 in the list, but you will need to install extra files in order for that to work. If you haven't done that yet, you can choose just WAV or AIFF, and you could convert it in something like iTunes. So I'll save that as an AIFF. So we've just created a pretty good continuous looping track. But in some circumstances, you might not want your loops to repeat immediately. You might want a little pause in between each repetition. For example, if you're working on a choreography, the section that you're working on may not start and end in the same body position. So you might need a second to physically reset and get ready for the next repetition. If you're working on improv or drum solos, you might want just a moment to breathe between the next repetition. So now let's look at how to create a loop with a pause. Now, a loop with a pause is easy in theory. You just have to insert a little bit of silence in between the repetitions. The thing is that the length of that silence matters. It needs to make sense to your instincts as a dancer in order to be useful. So for example, you might want your loop to be exactly 4 beats long. And how long 4 beats is depends on the song that you're working with. So let's look at how to do that. The first step is that I need to open up my original music file in Audacity. And I know that this chunk right here is my main loop. But if I want 4 extra beats, I'm going to grab a whole lot of extra music. I'm going to grab an extra 15 seconds. Now that's way more than I need, but just to be safe, I'm going to grab a lot. So I'm going to choose Edit and Copy, create a new Audacity file, paste it in, and I'm going to adjust my view so I can see a little bit more. Now, looking at this waveform, I see this little bump, and often bumps are a phrase, right? You get that little quiet moment that often appears. This is not a rule, just a tendency that I've seen over and over again. So I'm just going to select that chunk and play it and see if it's about 4 beats of the music. So I've selected it, and now I press play. So that was about 5 beats. So I'm on the right track. So I'm going to begin by trimming off everything after that. I'm going to select it and press the delete key on my keyboard to delete it. Now let's zoom in a little bit more. That was a little too much, so I'll zoom back out. Now I'm going to select this extra bit and see how close I am. Again, that's still about 5. And while I was playing that, I noticed that the 4th beat lands around on this 36-second mark. So I'm going to grab just a little bit later than that, delete that bit, and let's listen again. Now that sounds like pretty close to 4 beats to me, but we don't really want to hear that extra little lump of music. That will have a very jarring transition. So what we're going to do is, instead of playing that music, we're going to silence it. So we're going to turn that moment of music into silence on the audio track. And we're going to do that by pressing either Command L, as in lima bean, or Control L if you're on Windows. This option is also available under the Edit menu, but for some reason, it's often grayed out. I don't know why that is. I've seen lots of people mentioning this as a bug online, but the key combination will work. So if you press Command L or Control L, it's still here on the timeline. You can see that it's still part of the music, but it's silenced. Now we need to scroll to the beginning, get rid of the extra silence there because we don't want that to be part of our loop. So I'm going to delete that, not silence it. Then I'm going to select all, copy, press the right arrow key to move my cursor to the end, and paste. So this gives us our first loop, then some silence, which we believe to be 4 beats long, and then our next loop. So let's listen to some of that transition. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's pretty close. My silence is just the tiniest bit too short. So if I want to extend that a little bit, what I can do is select a tiny little bit, then use, I've got the play button going, which is why the copy option is not available. So I have to stop my playback. Now that selected music can be copied. Press the right arrow key to move to the end of the selection and paste. So that makes that silence just a little bit longer. Let's preview that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, I'm still just a little bit rushing it. So I'm going to paste in another little chunk by clicking into the timeline and pressing Command V or Control V. Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there we go. So now we've got a real 4 beats of repetition. Now you'll notice that I changed this pause, but not the pause on the end. So what we need to do now is to delete from this point to the end, and I can do that by holding down the Shift key while I click, or you could have dragged to click. And then I press the Delete key on my keyboard. Now, since this has the right length of pause, we can select all and copy and paste it out. Let's double check that one more time to make sure we've got it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we can paste that over and over again. So as you can see, there's always some trial and error, and you may need to tweak it a little bit to get precisely the effect that you want. So don't get frustrated if it doesn't come right on the first try. And of course, you can save your project file and export it as usual. Thanks for watching. For more geek-tacular resources, visit bellydancegeek.com.